Welcome back to Continue the Conversation. I am your host, Tega Ororo. Over the last several years, the media landscape has been under intense pressure. Trust in institutions is shifting, misinformation spreads faster ever online. Political leaders, including former President Donald Trump, also current President Donald Trump, have openly attacked both traditional and independent journalism. But at the same time, a new generation of media builders has emerged. People who believe that independent journalism is not just important, but essential for a functioning democracy. Today, I'm joined by Tara, a media entrepreneur, a founder who's been working on the front lines of building independent news organizations designed to reach modern audiences in a format in this media environment. In this conversation, we're going to talk about what it actually takes to build and run an independent media organization today, from editorial decisions to sustainability, from audience trust to navigating political attacks. We also talk about Tara's experience as a female founder in a space that's historically dominated by legacy institutions, men, and long-standing power structures. This episode is about journalism, leadership, resilience, and the future of independent media. Let's get into it. Hi, everyone. So we have Tara McGowan with us. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for being with us.
Thanks for having me, Tika. I'm excited.
We actually met at CrookedCon, which is like an event put on by like Crooked Media. And it was a really interesting like play of things. And I was like, oh my gosh, I finally get to meet her in real life. So I always get excited to like meet people who I like connect with like digitally in real life. And I'm like, yeah, everyone's like weird next to my name, which is really exciting. But I went over a little bit in the intro who Tara was and like what she does. But I want to get into like this really great conversation with her. So I want you to tell us about your path and how you got involved in media and like civil engagement in the first place. So we can start with that as our conversation.
Sure. A long, long time ago. No, I'm kidding. So I started my career in journalism. I always wanted to be a journalist. I knew from about probably 12, but then it really became really clear to me at 15. I was 15 years old when 9/11 happened. And my aunt was murdered in 9/11. She worked in the South Tower. In going through that really traumatic experience on a personal level, but also like a national and global level, I became really obsessed with the media narrative and how the Bush administration at that time spun all of these lies to start a war that had nothing to do with the perpetrators of the attacks. And so that was where I became really passionate about going into journalism, speaking truth to power. I started my journalism career in New York at 60 Minutes. I worked for PBS Frontline. So storytelling, truth telling has always been really important and core to me. And then in my time at 60 Minutes, I covered the 2008 presidential election and primary. And I got very swept up in then Senator Obama's candidacy. And so I made a very big career pivot pretty young in my career. I wanted to go into politics because I wanted to have more of a direct impact. And so I moved to DC cold. I will not go through my whole resume by any means, but that was my big pivot into politics where I spent about a dozen years as a sort of accidental digital strategist. I was on President Obama's reelection campaign as a senior digital video producer, managing a big video team, telling stories of voters, traveling with the president and the vice president and the first lady. It was truly like I peaked in my 20s with that job. It was such a fun and exciting time to be in politics. And then after that, helped start a number of different organizations and efforts that were focused on trying to level up progressives and Democrats' work on reaching voters online, which is really important. Fast forward, I was running a $40 million digital advertising program against Donald Trump in 2016 and was one of very few people, it was very lonely at the time, who believed very, very wholeheartedly that he was going to win that election. So anyhow, after that election, I started my first organization acronym, which was an incubator. Moonshot, I have always said, was career, the news organization I run today. I couldn't get a lot of traction with donors or investors to start a left-leaning news organization after 2016, but I kept at it, and I really believed fundamentally that we were never actually going to be able to realize the progress that the majority of American people want in this country if we were continuing to let the Republican Party and right-wing media drive the narrative that really shaped hearts and minds and election outcomes. So I've always been pretty obsessed with Roger Ailes and then Steve Bannon subsequently, who are just brilliant, evil masterminds about understanding media attention and the relationship to that with political outcomes and civic engagement. So I took this deep, really interesting experience I had working in political campaigns and organizations about how to be really surgical, how to be really efficient with your time and money, because you don't have much of either to reach the right people with the messages that compel them to pay attention and to get engaged. And I brought that back into my roots in journalism, and Courier was the byproduct. A very data-driven, values-driven, left-leaning news network focused. The heart of what we do at Courier is local news. We have newsrooms currently in 11 states with reporters on the ground, and we just recently announced we're expanding by the end of this year. And then, of course, we have the Courier National brand, which is one of the largest news brands now on TikTok in the country, which we're really proud of. So that was a long-winded explanation of how I got here, but I feel very, very, very lucky to have had a very crazy idea and to have been able to realize it. And that's really only because of the folks that have supported it and the amazing reporters we've brought into the fold who continue to do, I think, the most important work right now. And that's informing people about what's actually going on, how what's happening in Washington impacts them or will impact them. And same thing with their state houses. We have a massive need for more civic education in this country, as it's been really stripped from our public education system, I think somewhat intentionally over the years. So I feel really lucky, grateful, and humbled by the work. And it really is just a credit to the team we've built.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Like, that inspires me, because before we even did this podcast, I did a little bit of cyber stalking about you. And
it's not all good, like most things on the internet.
for me, it was all good. It inspires me in a lot of different ways to see a woman fight for what she wants and to get it, and for it to grow. And I've also met her team in different circumstances. And the way they speak about you, it's like you inspire them too. So your work will inspire generations of people, including me, to keep doing what I'm doing even right now, to share news, right? I always said, as I was doing campaign work, I was like, I'm never going to be the face of something. I'm just going to sit in the background and help people. That was the biggest Uno reverse in my life, 2020, right? And I was like, well, that changed. But then I see people like you, Aaron Parnas, a whole bunch of other people saying I have a platform. I want to use it in a way that will shape government, to shape the world and get people to actually care about stuff. And you do. And my next question to you is because we're in this Women's History Month discussion, as a woman founder of a media outlet, what is one of those unique challenges you face? I don't want to say men, but other than men, what is the unique challenge?
Say, why are men?
But what would be a unique challenge that you face on a daily basis with your organization, with your life in general? So yeah.
Girl. I mean, I think, look, I don't think it's, surprising to anyone that I think everything we do is harder as women, people who identify as women. We live in a patriarchal society and system. I am a big, big believer that we are actually living through the last gasp of the patriarchy, which is what motivates me on the daily, because I am determined to see and live within a matriarchal society. And I think we're getting closer, though it's going to be violent and horrible in this last gasp period as we're experiencing. But it's systemic, right? And it's even worse for women of color than it is for white women in all industries. It's not unique to media. Honestly, I think there's frankly more journalists that are women, a lot of service oriented things outside of the military, women tend to lead on, but it still was really hard. Like I mentioned, I started my career at 60 Minutes. 60 Minutes and CBS were incredibly misogynistic places to work. They were really old school, literally the row of very pretty young women assistants in front of the old male correspondence offices. It was just optically, it was patriarchal. The treatment of women was not great. I have experienced sexual assault in the workplace and in my personal life, right? So it's you I think to answer the question, like one of the biggest struggles and challenges for me has been actually figuring out how to let my guard down that I had to create to be able to withstand and operate within systems and workplaces that did not treat women or women's ideas with the same level of respect or credibility as those of men. And so to unpack that a little bit more, I credit that guard that I built for my resilience and my persistence. I never took no for an answer. In fact, I used to joke all the time, but it still remains true that the most motivating thing I have ever experienced is when a mediocre white man tells me that I cannot do something or that it's not my place to do something. You better believe whatever, even if I didn't care about that thing
I'm
before
doing
that
it now.
conversation, I'm going to see that thing through to the bitter end.
Hmm.
And it has been motivational. And so that's also where I source gratitude for all the mediocre men I've had to deal with professionally and personally in my life who just get by with doing less than we have to. But honestly, in my later life, now that I'm 40, I can say I'm old. In my middle
You're not
age,
old. I was like, you're like 28. Sorry. I'm like, you're
oh
like
my
28.
God, love you,
Tell me your
love you, girl.
skincare routine
I'll come
like
on your
later.
podcast
Later.
anytime. I just turned 40 a few weeks ago. I'm very excited about it. I feel like I was born 40. But in my later adult life, the new challenge has actually been softening a little bit more and letting that guard back down a little bit because it becomes sort of a crutch and a protective layer. And once you're in a position of leadership and authority, which I am now, it can be sort of construed as like having a chip on your shoulder or bitterness, and that doesn't solve anything. So I've been doing a lot of work the past few years on really like, being proud of myself and loving myself and really owning and stepping into my power and not being scared of it or trying to make it smaller, but kind of really filling myself with a lot of gratitude and self-love in order to actually be a softer leader and help others. And the thing I'm proudest of in my entire career has been that I have had a number of women who have worked for me go on to start their own organizations and companies. Nothing pulls at my heartstrings or makes me feel more proud or accomplished than that. And so that's something I hope I can do even more of in the next chapter of my career.
I don't know what to say, but like, thank you. That was like inspiring in so many ways. Just to know, like, now, I feel like a lot of women now just have that guard. I feel like I definitely have that wall. I'm like, I got to protect myself. I got to work so much harder. And I'm like, the
And we
biggest thing I'm
do,
like, we
right?
do. There's also moments where it's like you can relax and enjoy the moments you are having in between, right? I'm like, I'm learning that now, and I'm like, I'm uncomfortable. But that shouldn't be the case, right? It's like you built this wall up for so long that's like to rest and to relax and to enjoy these moments are so hard that I'm working on that now. So I appreciate that. I appreciate hearing
Well,
that.
and to remember your agency, right? Like, because that's
Mhm.
what the patriarchy wants to take away from you, right? They want us to make us feel like we have no power and that we are oppressed and all these things. And it really is a choice in a lot of ways because we get to choose who we surround ourselves with, what
Yep.
energy we surround ourselves with. And I think that's an easy thing to forget. And it constantly feels like we have to prove ourselves. But actually, that was a big breakthrough for me a few years ago was like, wait a second, I don't actually have to deal with people that make me feel small or bad or that I have to like keep punching up. And that's been just game changing for me is to just protect your energy, right? Protect your energy. I
Yeah.
mean, Taylor Swift said it better, right? Treat your energy like a luxury item. But I really do subscribe to that.
Thank you for that. We're going to get into some deep topics now. Even though we started with some really great topics, I want to talk about independent media in a hostile environment because we currently live in what I call the Trump empire. Because the way he's moving, it's very much like colonizer, conquer, defeat, destroy, oppress everyone in general. And I want to I want to hear from you how your organization navigates the threats of like credibility and safety in a climate where like everything is considered fake news and is weaponized, right? Because I feel like for me, like when I see coroner news, I'm like, okay, this is credible news. I understand it as credible news. I'm accepting it as credible news. If I look at Fox News, I'm like, this is a joke, right? So, like, how do you navigate the consistent threat where people are like, this is fake news, this is fake news? Because at a certain point, what is true and what is false at this point? It's kind of my question to you.
Yeah, no, it's an excellent question. And it's interesting because, like, so Courier turned 7 years old in June, which is wild. And I think, I mean, I've been asked that question all the time. And I would say that every year for the past 7 years, I might have a slightly different answer. Certainly a very different answer I'll answer you with today than I did at the very beginning. And when I set out to start Courier, that was the biggest attack that I and the organization got, was that we were fake news. We were pink slime. We were, I was a political strategist masking as news compared to all these pink slime sites on the right. And none of it was accurate. None of it was fair. None of it was true. Those criticisms have very much ceased. And I think, hindsight's 2020. At the time, I was very sensitive to them and very defensive. And you're never winning when you're on defense, right? Note to Democrats: we stay on offense. But those have subsided in large part because our journalism speaks for itself. Our reporters, like, they are the trusted messengers, right? We trained a lot of print journalists to be TikTok and Instagram influencers and package their factual and values-driven reporting into a way that is conversational and personal and accessible to people. And they're putting their names and faces on the line. Nearly all of our local newsrooms have won in-state press awards. And so anytime you're like having to over-explain yourself, right? Just like being on defense, you're losing. And so I realized that, like, the work really did need to speak for itself, and it does. And so now if we get any criticisms like that, they brush right off, because I know that they're absolutely baseless, and they're just designed, I often take them actually as compliments. Same thing when people copy us, which they do all the time. Like, imitation's the finest form of flattery. Like, we have to tell ourselves that so we don't get angry. But it's true. Like, anytime Fox News writes about me, which they do, or right-wing media covers us or our newsrooms, I'm like, guys, look what you're doing. You're doing something right. They're exerting energy on us because they see us as because you can't actually challenge the credibility of our journalism. If you try, it really demonstrates that on its own. The teams fact check everything. We take the responsibility we have of informing the public very seriously. That said, we do not believe in objectivity or balance. That was very controversial when I started Courier. It's never been controversial on the right. It was very controversial, most especially and most surprisingly and frustratingly amongst my peers on the left or in liberal legacy media. Yeah. And I think it's because Fox News and Roger Ailes and Murdoch gave, political media or partisan media a really bad name. And they did, because they used it to divide people, to espouse hate, to espouse, to advocate for violence, to just spread straight lies. And I always had to say, when I started Courier, we are not trying to be the Fox News of the left, and we are not. We are also not trying to fight fire with fire. We're fighting fire with water, because we actually can be transparent about our values, which are actually the positions of the majority of Americans. Mainstream media and right-wing media have labeled them as progressive or left, but actually most quote-unquote progressive positions are positions held by over 70% of Americans, which means they're just popular. And so, again, like anything in living and growth, like the second, like, you don't let something get under your skin when you have the courage of your convictions, it sort of subsides. And, the media, we were also ahead of the curve. I think the media ecosystem has caught up, where now, right, everyone is a journalist. Everyone who can produce content, right? Every creator is now a trusted source. That's really, really problematic. If you don't know what you're talking about, or you don't know how to source journalism well, even if you have the best intentions. So we do a lot of work on that, on training folks, creators, how to really understand how to source the information they're providing, because they have this responsibility now. But also, nobody believes in objectivity because it was always a lie. So now I think the historic, trust in media is at a historic low in this country. And I think in large part, that's because so many media outlets said that we are fair and balanced, or we are objective. And Americans are not stupid. They knew that that was not the case. Whether you're doing the bidding of your corporate shareholders or you're doing the bidding of a political party, it doesn't matter. You're doing the bidding of somebody. You're making decisions every day of what to cover, how to cover it, and how often to cover it.
Yeah.
So I've always said that transparency about where you stand, what your values are, who your investors are, that is so much more important than this idea of objectivity or balance, which frankly just ended up lifting up lies and liars as equivalent to truth tellers because of political asymmetry. And so I just think that today those criticisms are not as prevalent in terms of if we're pink slime or fake news media. I think what's more important now is, are you able to reach beyond acquire? Right. And that's really important to us at Courier, especially at our local news network, is that the way that these algorithms are designed is to reinforce your existing belief systems. But we know that the people who actually decide elections at the presidential down to the very hyper local are the folks that are the least tuned into politics. And they're the ones who are most susceptible to being reached with disinformation and propaganda. And that's what we set out to do, is to make sure that they know where we stand so they can make that judgment call of whether they trust us or not. But we have found time and time again that by being transparent, over 46% of our subscribers self-identify as independent or Republican. So like, they might not agree with us, but they trust us because we're being really honest about what we stand for and what we care about. And that also is very evident in the stories that we report on and amplify.
Thank you. I think we're going to add a little more to that. And I kind of have this question that I've asked a couple of different people now who are kind of in this new media independent realm. It's like, how do you define independent media, and what distinguishes legacy media from journalism and corporate news networks, right? Because I think for me, I'm looking at it a little bit differently, because I look at like legacy media as like CNN, ABC News, and then like Al Jazeera, like BBC News, like all those organizations. And then like independent media is kind of this like weird ground that's being created, not really being created, like type of thing. So like, how do you define it and how do you distinguish it? So like, it can kind of help people really understand this new landscape.
It's an excellent question because, I think independent media used to be seen as like fringe and small, right? And like now what I would say is that you are either state-run media or you're independent media in this country. Meaning, if you are media if you're a media organization that is making any decisions about what to cover, what not to cover because of fear of being sued by this administration, as many legacy media outlets have been, you are no longer independent. Obviously, corporate owned media is corporate media. That means that you are not independent because you have to appease the work of that organization needs to uphold the shareholders' interests. So you cannot be independent media if you have corporate shareholders how the financial health of that organization is going to determine what you report on and what you do not, right? So like CBS News, not independent media, right? I would call them now state-run media, given what they've done.
Yeah, very much true.
Under Barry Weiss, 100%. Right. And also now distribution platforms are media. They're not treated that way yet, given Section 230, but like they really are. Like what mass media used to be was the few broadcast networks and legacy newspapers that reach the most people. Today, the thing that reaches the most people is the platforms that distribute content. So Facebook, X, TikTok. These are the mass media platforms now. Even if they're not the ones that are producing the content, they are putting their thumb on the scale on what people see and how often with the algorithms that we don't have any say about, right? And so that's one designation. The other thing I would say is that your independent media today, if you are truly making all of your editorial decisions without any influence of your investors, your donors, whoever gives you money to do that journalism, and you are not doing it on behalf of a political party or a specific organization or special interest group. And this is what really infuriated me in those early criticisms of Courier and myself that are all, people can read all about them on the internet if they Google me, but is that the biggest criticism and attack was that we were essentially a tool for the capital D Democratic Party. And that infuriated me so much because sure, I have worked for Democrats in the past. I only worked on one Democratic campaign ever in my life, and that was Barack Obama's. So I was sort of like characterized as this big Democratic Party operative. I built my first organization, and it was wildly successful, called Acronym, because I was calling out Democrats for their insufficiencies when it came to communications. Also, no Democratic committee or campaign has ever given Courier $1, even when we would like them to for advertising. So it just
Yeah.
irritated me so much that like we are truly independent. We do not determine what to report on in order to protect the Democratic Party at all costs. In fact, we are very, very outspoken, myself especially, about the failures and weaknesses of the Democratic Party establishment and the leaders of the Democratic Party. So that by its very definition makes us independent.
Awesome. Thank you. I kind of sit in this space where I'm like, am I part of this independent news media because I'm out here reporting
You
things, but
sure
I'm
are.
actually not oh,
Take
okay.
it, you sure are. Absolutely. You
Let
are
me know about
talking
that
about
training
current
course.
events today, like, right, like maybe you're not doing your own original reporting, or maybe you are, but even if you're not doing that now, like, Aaron Partis, who I know very well now, like, he doesn't do original reporting. He is taking breaking news, and then, but he is playing such a critical role because of the platform he's built at getting that information in front of people. We do that
Yeah.
at Courier National too. A lot of our content is aggregated news from other sources. A lot of it is also original, but we're putting it in front of people who are not going to go see it on the New York Times website, or are not going to tune in to cable news, et cetera. So it's still a really critical responsibility and role in the ecosystem.
Thank you. I'm gonna put that on my resume now, independent journalist. I'm gonna add that now because I feel like I've gotten the like accreditation for it. And I kind of want to talk because this is a little more important to add to the conversation. Is how do you balance like quality journalism with the realities of digital engagement and audience growth? Right. I think at the back of my mind or any creator's mind, they're like, if I'm gonna create something, I want to also enjoy watching it, but I'm also like, how many views can I get? What's the potential? Who's my audience? Like all these stuff is like in my brain. That's a consistent question you're asking. So I think it's a little different for like a news organization. So I'm kind of like trying to figure that out. I also saw what is it, Garner News? It's the Michigan version that you guys have
Gander.
here. Love you guys.
Gander.
Gander,
Yeah.
there we go. Love you guys. I saw there was a post about the election that's coming up, and I was like, "Ooh, there's tea there." We'll talk about that later. But
You
with
did
that
DM
being
me
said,
that.
we'll talk about that. But that was really great quality journalism, and I was like, digitally, it's gonna do really well for the people who reside in Michigan, right? And the audience growth, I was like, it's gonna grow the audience who don't know you guys are there digitally. So I guess what I want to understand from like your viewpoint, like how do you balance that? How do you understand that? Because it's quite different than like just popping on the news, making a station vibe. You have more power in your hands when you post digitally.
Yeah, no, that's right. And I want to say, take it, like, you are an independent journalist because you're asking phenomenal questions. So you've got this, girl. And also, just in the setup for that question, like, it's so interesting you called out that video. So that's by our senior political reporter in Michigan, Kyle Kaminsky. He's a phenomenal reporter, award-winning reporter. And this is not true all the time. So I will circle back to this is an exception, but it's a really good example you pulled out. Kyle started this video series called So What Michigan, where he breaks down complicated topics in Michigan, usually about the state government or the elections in the state, things that really matter to Michiganders. And he always does it outside, and it's always frigid where we all live by some, I don't know how you do it. So he's always outside, he's always freezing, and he is breaking down these really complex stories into really conversational ways. It was an idea he had, and we had all of our reporters pitch different product ideas, and it did exactly what you said. It built a huge audience for the Gander. It like increased the growth of that audience significantly, even though it's not the only content coming out of the Gander's social channels. And our hypothesis on that is because he became a trusted, frequently seen face and voice in the news feeds, and more people were sharing it because they loved what they were learning from it, right? You learn something. That's key to content that works, is people want to feel like they've learned something, they've gotten something out of the content. And so more people share it, so it gets in front of more people, and then they look at everything else. They're like, oh, I want to follow this. That is rare. It is the goal, is to be able to have informative, compelling content that also leads you to growth, so then you can monetize, so then you can build partnerships, all these things. It is the exception to the rule, because more often than not, we're trying to figure out how to subsidize the really quality reporting we do that doesn't drive as much engagement all the time. I often, repeat back what was one of my daily mantras when I worked in politics and was running political programs, which is that engagement does not equal persuasion.
Yep.
right? If you really want to inform people, the thing that gets the most views, the most virality, it's happening because the people that are liking it and viewing it and sharing it either agree vehemently already with what it's saying or they oppose it vehemently. It's
Yep.
not often actually doing that work that you need it to do, which is to open up a curiosity or a change of perception or mind. And so that's very difficult because when you're building a media business, you are constantly going to go for the rage bait, for the things that are going to reinforce belief systems that the algorithm's going to reward. And then what have you done? And when I set out to start Courier, I was really intentional that it needed to have diversified revenue and needed to be always, forever subsidized in part by philanthropy and not ever need to get to the point where it was self-sustaining on traditional revenue for this very reason, that we need to be able to protect our ability to get the information out that we know changes hearts and minds, but will not be the highest viewed, most engaging, most profitable product. So I was very intentional that I did not want to just join the very successful, profitable companies of some of my dear friends like Crooked Media and Pod Save America, who their halo effect is small by the very nature of what they do. They are really talking to, informing, and engaging folks that are already on their team. And so I think our national products do veer a little bit, but it's a lot of young people who identify as independents, a lot of people who didn't vote in 24. So I still think there's a lot of value there, but it's a risk. And every media organization and every independent journalist who's out on their own with a Substack or a YouTube series or a TikTok series, they have this challenge of trying to balance what is the information that people need and that I want them to have, and what are they actually going to engage with that's going to give me those numbers to keep growing and reaching more people. It's a daily tension. I don't see a way out of it, especially when we are living in a media ecosystem that unfortunately is very much by design by these corporations and these big tech oligarchs and overlords, where they want as much attention to stay on these platforms to sell as much advertising as possible. Until we can regulate social media and big tech, I don't know how we get out of that tension.
Thank you for that. I think my next like major kind of question to you, with also being said, I'm going to pitch you an idea. Do a Meet the Candidate series in Michigan, right? But like in a way where it's like, you know, where they do like the house interview and you like walk around somewhere and you tell them the favorite thing. It's like Vogue 100 questions. Do a Meet the Candidate series after the endorsement convention or during the endorsement convention. It's going to be a hit. Just a thought.
Love it.
You're welcome.
Wrote it down. Love it.
With that being said, what advice would you give to someone like me, especially me, because I'm loving all the advice. I am saving it for my future knowledge when I start my digital media empire. Don't know what it's going to be called. We'll decide soon. But what advice would you give to women, non-binary leaders, people who identify as women, young individuals, people of color, building organizations in a male-dominated sector? Because right now, I'm fighting for my life in the state of Michigan. I'm going to be honest. I'm sitting here advocating for people to like work with new media and creators. They're hearing, they're listening, and I'm getting a lot of pushback because they don't understand. And I'm like, we're going to win elections if we talk to each other and also realize the power of this new media creator space. So what advice would you give me? What advice would you give to others, women, non-binary individuals, building organizations like this?
And even to my younger self, trust yourself. Trust yourself. I know it sounds obvious. I'm sure it's something you already do, but I do think that every time you get told no, check in with yourself and be like, are they right or are they wrong? And I guarantee you, if it is something you believe deeply in, the answer that's going to come up every time is that they're wrong. And that is going to further embolden you to keep talking to people until you find the ones who get it. Because the loudest people and the most people won't get it, but you will find the ones who do. And they are going to not only be in your corner, but stay in your corner. And some of my biggest and most important and influential to me mentors and investors who have believed in me have never wavered in their belief in me. And their support has only increased. And the resources and the networks and the connections that they bring in that have helped me build and grow have multiplied over time. And so just do not give up until you find your people, and then you won't need to. And know that they are out there, and that every single no is getting you closer to a yes. And I got very lucky, I will say. Very, very lucky, because I did not want to start an organization, and I was asked by some very wealthy individuals what organization I would start if I had the resources to start it. And what a dream question. I didn't even know I ever wanted to be asked. And so I say that because that isn't going to happen to everybody. And I know how lucky I was to have that, and how privileged I was to be in the room where they heard me, that they could then think to ask me that question or pose that question. That is very uncommon, but it's important to my story because it's true. Right. And so I didn't say, who me? No. Right. Which you could do if you're taken by surprise or that isn't what you're working towards. Instead, I was like, oh, I've got ideas, a lot of ideas. Let me share those ideas with you. And they didn't like all of them, and they like some of them. And so when you have the courage of your conviction, and you know in your heart of hearts that you have a brilliant idea, it is a brilliant idea by the very nature that you know that it is. And you just have to find the people who will agree with you, and they are out.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm taking that advice to heart in so many ways. And we're about to wrap up our conversation. I think there's one final question I have for you to end our discussion, which I think will continue on in the comment sections and will continue on for like years to come, because whoever finds this video, I think will be inspired in multiple ways. What is one thing you want every listener to walk away with after this conversation? Like, what is that thing that you're like, after everything we talked about, what is the major thing you're like, you need to remember this part of this conversation? This is the only thing, if you care about, that's the thing. What's the one thing?
Gosh, well, I really love this conversation. I'm really grateful for it, because you didn't sit here and ask me about the Iran war or Christy Nome or McCullen, which is also
I would not ask you that.
but like this is just like a heart space for me, is talking about entrepreneurship and doing the hard things and overcoming the challenges. And I think that's the one thing, and especially to people who feel like they don't have the privilege, the access, the resources, but they have the idea, they have the vision, they have the dream. Like, trust yourself and believe in yourself, and let every no get you closer to the yes. And I just think that applies to everything, whether it's your career or it's your relationships, or it's like to just like to really, really, like, when you know that something, if an idea does not go away and it keeps coming up, even if you're not given it the time of day, you've got to sit with that idea and you've got to realize it. And so it might take years, it might take decades, it might take one chance conversation. You just never know. And so, like, do not give up on yourself, and do not give up on an idea that does not leave you, because that means that it is meant for you. And I very much believe in that. I believe the universe does not let things that are meant for us pass us by, or let us pass them by. And so just I remind myself of that every day, to trust myself, because it has always led to the most unexpected, incredible opportunities, relationships, connections, friendships. And it's when I don't trust myself, and it's when I doubt myself, that things get harder and darker.
Sorry, I'm lost for words, because this conversation has inspired my life in so many ways. You really don't understand. I'm in this weird, like, figuring it out moment. And just like some of the things you're saying, I'm like, why do I say this to myself and I don't believe it? And so now I'm hearing it from someone else's mouth, and I'm like, okay, I kind of need to believe it, because I think this universe is telling me something. So I want to thank you for being a part of this conversation, sharing your wisdom, your knowledge, your heart, your passion. Like, it means the world to me. And I think to the women, the people who will watch this and be inspired by this, and who will check out your organization and the news that you guys are putting out there. Because for me right now, there's hope, because people are like, you are doing the work. I remember when Kamala lost, I cried. I was like, the world is over. And then someone reminded me that we're not done. There are people still fighting. So find the people who will fight with you, and do that fight together, right? You don't go into like a fist fight alone. You always get like backup. So this is the case where you find your backup. And I feel like Coroner News, your organization, you as a female founder, powerhouse, extravaganza woman, you're one of those fighters who I will definitely take in this battle for a better America.
As are you, Tega. And exactly what you said is right. I didn't do any of it alone either. Like, we can't do this stuff alone. It's too hard. It's too hard. And the world is too dark right now, and it's up to all of us to get it back into a direction where we can build something brand new. And so also I want you to believe in yourself, because you have already built an amazing community of people that want to hear from you, and that is not an easy thing to do. So you just keep going. Keep going.
Thank you. Thanks for this conversation.
Thank you for having me. What a pleasure.
Okay, guys, that was my conversation with Tara. What I found most compelling about the conversation is the reminder that the media isn't about headlines. It's about infrastructure. It's about who builds the platforms that deliver information, who funds them, and who decides what stories get told. At a time when journalism is under pressure from economic disruptions and digital misinformation, independent media organizations are playing an increasingly important role in keeping the public informed and institutions accountable. And hearing directly from someone who's building that infrastructure in real time gives us a deeper understanding. It gives us hope that understanding how these challenges and how important and what is working. In this episode, it made me think more critically about the media I am consuming, you're consuming, and the system behind it. So feel free to share with someone who cares about journalism, democracy, and the future of information. As always, thank you for continuing the conversation with me. I'll see you next time. Bye, friends.